The rain always sounded louder up here. 40 floors above the city, the storm wasn't just weather. It was a weight pressing against the glass, blurring the lights of the skyline into smeared streaks of gold and red. I rubbed my temples, the glow of my computer monitor the only light left in the office. It was past midnight. The merger documents were spread out before me like a battlefield map, every clause a potential landmine. Rossetti Designs was on the verge of the biggest acquisition in our history, and I was the only thing standing between my company and ruin. I should have gone home hours ago. But when you're a woman trying to hold onto an empire built by your father, you don't get the luxury of sleep. You don't get the luxury of mistakes. I didn't look up immediately. I thought it was security doing their rounds. "I'm still working," I called out, my voice sounding thin in the space. "I'll lock up when I leave." "No, you won't." The voice was like velvet dragged over gravel. Oh, smooth. Dangerous. I knew that voice. I knew it from boardrooms where she'd dismantled my arguments with a single glance. I knew it from gala dinners where we'd exchanged polite smiles that hid sharp teeth. I looked up. Valentina Vance stood in the doorway. She didn't wait for an invitation. He never did. Valentina walked into my office like she owned the building, the city, and the air I was breathing. She was wearing a tailored black suit, sharp enough to cut, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it emphasized the predatory angle of her cheekbones. She held a manila envelope in one hand, swinging it casually against her thigh. "Valentina," I said, standing up. I needed to be standing. I needed to feel like I had some height, some power. "What are you doing here? Security shouldn't have let you up." "Security knows better than to stop me," she said, stopping just on the other side of my desk. She didn't sit. She just looked at me, her eyes dark and unreadable. "And you should know better than to leave your blinds open when you're entertaining compromising situations." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Valentina smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark smelling blood in the water. She tossed the envelope onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood, stopping just inches from my hands. "Open it. I don't have to do anything you say. Don't you?" He stepped around the desk. I instinctively stepped back, my hips hitting the edge of the heavy mahogany. I was trapped between the hard wood and her. She smelled of expensive perfume and cold rain. "Open it, Elena. Or I'll send these to the board tomorrow morning. Before the merger vote." My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. I tipped the contents out. Photos spilled onto the desk. I picked up the first one. My breath hitched. It was from the charity gala last month. I was in the hallway laughing, leaning in close to a male investor. The angle made it look intimate. Too intimate. The next photo showed a hand on my waist. The next showed us entering a private elevator together. It was innocent. It was business. But in the right light with the right captions it looked like scandal. It looked like misconduct. It looked like something the board would use to vote me out for instability. "This is ridiculous," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You know what this is. It's nothing." "Perception is reality, Elena," Valentina said softly. She was close now. Too close. I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "And right now the perception is that you're vulnerable. That you're distracted. That you're not fit to lead." "You're blackmailing me," I said. The word felt heavy, ugly. "I'm offering you a solution." Valentina placed her hands on the desk on either side of me, caging me in. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. I should have pushed her away. I should have screamed. But I couldn't move. The air between us crackled, thick with something that wasn't just fear. "I don't want your company, Elena. I don't want your money. I want you. Me. Your time. Your attention. Your compliance." Her voice dropped to a whisper, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold office. 1 month. Every night after work. You come to me. You do as I say. You belong to me. "That's insane," I breathed. "You want me to be your... what?" "Your servant." "I want you to be mine," she corrected. "No contracts. No witnesses. Just you and me. If you complete the month, the photos disappear. The merger goes through. You keep your crown. And if I say no? Then I walk out that door," she said, straightening up slightly, though she didn't move away. "And by morning, every member of your board will have these in their inbox. You'll lose the company, Elena. You'll lose everything your father built." I looked at the photos again. I looked at her. Valentina Vance was my rival. We had fought for every contract, every inch of market share for 5 years. I hated her. I hated her coldness, her arrogance, the way she looked at me like I was a puzzle she intended to solve. But standing there, trapped by her presence, I felt a heat rising in my chest that confused me. It was anger, yes. But underneath the anger there was a terrifying pull. "You're enjoying this," I said. "Immensely," she admitted. Her gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. "You're so fiery when you're cornered. It's captivating." "1 month," I repeated. My voice sounded hollow. "Every night," she confirmed. 7 p.m. My penthouse. "You won't be late." "This is coercion," I said, trying to find some ground to stand on. "This is wrong. Business is war, Elena. And in war, the victor takes the spoils." She reached out, her fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Her touch was cool, but it burned my skin. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. "Tell me to leave. Tell me no. Say the word and I'll walk." I looked at her. I saw the challenge in her eyes. She wanted me to fight. She wanted me to break. But she also wanted me to choose. That was the trap. She was giving me the illusion of choice to make the submission sweeter. I thought about my company. I thought about my employees. I thought about the legacy I was supposed to protect. I swallowed the pride that had kept me fighting her for years. "Don't expect me to like it," I said quietly. Valentina's lips curved into a genuine smile this time. It transformed her face, making her look almost beautiful. Almost human. "I don't expect you to like it, darling," she murmured, leaning in until her lips brushed the shell of my ear. "I expect you to obey." She stepped back, breaking the spell. The cold air rushed back into the space she had occupied. She walked toward the door, not looking back. 7 p.m. Elena. "Don't keep me waiting." I was alone again. The rain was still hammering against the glass. The photos were still on the desk. I picked them up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I should have felt violated. I should have felt destroyed. But as I touched the spot on my ear where her lips had brushed, I realized with a sinking heart that I wasn't afraid of the month ahead. I was afraid of how much I was already looking forward to it. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like an ascent into the clouds, or perhaps into purgatory. I watched the digital numbers climb above the door, each digit changing with a soft chime that echoed too loudly in the silence. 45 floors. Then 46. Then 47. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel walls, looking pale and composed, but I knew the truth. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, desperate to escape. I had smoothed my skirt down a dozen times already. I had checked my hair in the reflective surface of the lobby doors. I had rehearsed what I would say, what I would do, how I would maintain some shred of dignity in a situation designed to strip it away. But dignity was a luxury I had surrendered last night when I agreed to Valentina's terms. The doors slid open directly into her foyer. There was no hallway, no buffer zone. Just immediate exposure to her world. The air inside was different from the office. It was cooler, conditioned to a perfect temperature that smelled of white tea and something sharper like ozone. The decor was minimalist to the point of austerity. White walls, gray floors, black furniture. No photos, no knickknacks, no signs of life. It was a showroom, not a home. It suited her perfectly. I stepped out, my heels clicking on the concrete floor. The sound seemed to announce my arrival to the empty space. I stood there for a moment, unsure of the protocol. Was I supposed to wait? Was I supposed to call out? "You're here." Valentina's voice came from the shadows of the living room. I jumped slightly, hating myself for the reaction. She stepped into the light, holding 2 crystal glasses. She had changed from the suit she wore at the office into something softer, yet somehow more intimidating. A silk robe, dark blue, tied loosely at the waist. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders in waves that looked soft enough to touch. She looked dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with business. I swallowed hard, forcing my feet to move. I walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. Close enough to see her, far enough to pretend I had space. "I'm here," I said. My voice sounded steady, which was a miracle. Valentina didn't smile. She set the glasses down on a low table and poured wine from a decanter. The liquid was deep red, swirling like blood in the crystal. She didn't offer me a seat. She didn't offer me a drink. She just watched me, her eyes tracking my every micro-movement. "Come here," she said. It wasn't a request. I walked around the table until I was standing in front of her. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could smell her perfume now that I was closer. It was the same scent from last night, but here in her private space, it felt more intimate. More encompassing. "You're tense," Valentina observed. She picked up one of the glasses and held it out to me. Not to drink. She held it by the stem, waiting for me to take it. I reached for it, but my fingers were shaking. I tried to steady them, but the tremor was visible. Valentina didn't hand it over. She kept holding it, forcing me to reach further, to stretch into her space. "Steady, Elena," she murmured. "If you can't hold a glass, how do you expect to handle anything else?" I gritted my teeth and forced my hand to stop shaking. I gripped the stem. Our fingers brushed. Her skin was cool, mine was burning. I pulled back quickly, clutching the glass like a lifeline. "Good," she said softly. "Now stand there. Don't move." I froze. Don't move? What was the point of this? Was this part of the humiliation? To stand like a statue while she evaluated me? I took a sip of the wine to hide my expression. It was expensive, complex, and dry. Valentina circled me. I could feel her presence behind me, a heat radiating against my back. I wanted to turn around, to face her, to not be so vulnerable with my back exposed. But she had said don't move. So I stood still. I stared at the wall ahead, at a large abstract painting that looked like a storm cloud. "Your posture is terrible," she said from behind my left ear. I flinched. "You slump when you're stressed. Makes you look weak." "I'm not weak," I said, my voice tight. "Prove it. Stand up straight. Shoulders back. Chin up." I adjusted my stance, pulling my shoulders back. I felt exposed, my chest pushed forward. "Higher," she commanded. She stepped in close again. I could feel the brush of her silk robe against my arm. She placed her hands on my shoulders. Her grip was firm, not painful, but unyielding. She pushed my shoulders back further, adjusting me like a mannequin. Then her hands slid down my arms, correcting the way I held myself. Every touch sent a jolt of electricity through my nervous system. I was hyper-aware of her palms, her fingers, the heat of her body. "Better," she whispered. "But you're still holding your breath." I exhaled sharply, realizing I had been doing exactly that. "Relax, Elena. I'm not going to hurt you. Not unless you ask me to." The words hung in the air, provocative and confusing. I turned my head slightly to look at her, but she was still behind me. "What do you want from me tonight?" I asked. "Is this just about standing around?" "Patience is a virtue you lack," she said. She moved around to face me again. She reached out and took the wine glass from my hand, setting it down next to hers without breaking eye contact. Now she was empty-handed and I was not. I felt unarmed. "I want to see if you can follow instructions," she said. "I want to see if you can let go of that need to control everything. You spend all day commanding boards and employees. Tonight you don't command. You listen." Sounded simple. Sounded impossible. "Look at me," she said. I lifted my gaze. Her eyes were dark, intense. There was no mockery in them now, just a focused scrutiny that made me feel naked. She stepped closer, eliminating the last inch of space between us. I could feel the warmth of her breath on my face. "You're blushing," she noted. Her voice was low, amused. "I'm not," I lied. I could feel the heat in my cheeks, betraying me. "You are. It's quite becoming on you. Most people turn pale when they're afraid. You turn pink. It suggests anticipation." "I'm not anticipating anything," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Valentina raised her hand. I flinched again, expecting a strike or perhaps a grab. Instead, her fingers gently grazed my jawline. Her touch was feather-light, tracing the bone from my ear down to my chin. It was so tender that it confused me more than any aggression could have. Her thumb brushed over my lower lip. "Your pulse is racing," she said. She moved her hand down, resting her fingertips against the side of my neck. I could feel her pulse there, or maybe it was mine vibrating against her touch. I couldn't tell where I ended and she began. "Are you afraid, Elena?" she asked. Her voice was a whisper, intimate and sultry. I should have said yes. I should have said that I was terrified of her, of the blackmail, of the situation. But looking into her eyes, with her hand on my neck and the silence of the penthouse wrapping around us, the truth was more complicated. "I don't know," I admitted. She smiled, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. "That's honest. At least you're not lying to me anymore. She didn't move her hand. He kept it there, grounding me, holding me in place. I felt like I was sinking into the floor or perhaps floating. The tension in my shoulders began to melt, replaced by a strange, heavy warmth. I hated that I liked her touch. I hated that after a day of fighting everyone, being held still by her felt like a relief. You have beautiful eyes, she said softly. When you're not glaring at me across a conference table. I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from Valentina Vance felt like traps. I stayed silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She leaned in. I thought she was going to kiss me. My lips parted slightly, an involuntary reaction. But she stopped just short of me. Her lips hovered near mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth but not touching. The denial was exquisite torture. Not tonight, she whispered against my mouth. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Disappointment washed over me, sharp and confusing. Tonight is about trust, she said, pulling back slightly. Her hand finally left my neck and I immediately missed the weight of it. You came here because you had to. But you stayed because you wanted to see what would happen. I didn't stay, I said weakly. You haven't let me leave. I could let you leave right now, she said. The door is unlocked. You could walk out. You could walk away from the deal, from the photos, from me. We both knew I couldn't. The photos were still leverage. But the way she said it made it feel like a choice. Like she was giving me the power to decide even if the options were rigged. I'm not leaving, I said. I know, she replied. She turned away from me, walking back toward the table. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip, her back to me. The moment of intimacy was over, replaced by the cold distance of the room. You can go home, Elena. I blinked. What? The first night is over, she said, looking at me over her shoulder. You followed instructions. You didn't run. That's enough for today. But, the month? I stammered. You said every night. And you'll be back tomorrow at 7, she said calmly. But tonight you're dismissed. I stood there, confused. I had prepared myself for humiliation, for demands, for things I wasn't sure I was ready for. Instead, I got a posture correction and a near kiss. I felt unmoored. Why? I asked. Valentina turned fully to face me. Her expression was unreadable again, the mask back in place. Because I want you to come back tomorrow, Elena. Not because you're trapped, but because you're curious. She walked past me toward the elevator doors. She pressed the button to call it for me. She didn't touch me again. She stood by the wall, arms crossed, watching me. Go home, Lena. Get some sleep. You look tired. I walked to the elevator, my legs feeling like jelly. I stepped inside and turned to look at her one last time. She was still watching me. Good night, Valentina, I said. Good night, Elena. The doors closed, cutting off the view of her standing alone in the vast, cold penthouse. As the elevator descended, I touched my neck where her fingers had been. The skin still tingled. I touched my lips where hers had almost been. They felt warm. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt like I had survived a battle. But as I stepped out into the lobby and walked into the cool night air, I realized I wasn't relieved. I was disappointed that it was over. I was already thinking about 7 p.m. tomorrow. I was already wondering what she would make me do next, what she would say, how she would look at me. Valentina Vance had blackmailed me into submission. But as I walked to my car, I realized with a sinking feeling that she hadn't needed the photos to make me come back. She had hooked me with something far more dangerous than scandal. She had made me want to know her. And in doing so, she had won the first round without even trying. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past my window. I told myself it was just survival. I told myself I was playing a long game. But when I finally lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I knew I was lying. I wasn't playing a game. I was falling into a trap, and the worst part was that I was walking into it with my eyes wide open. I closed my eyes and all I could see was the dark intensity of her gaze, and all I could feel was the ghost of her hand on my neck, holding me steady, holding me close, holding me tight. The restaurant was one of those places where the silence cost more than the food. Crystal chandeliers hung low over white tablecloths, casting a soft, flattering glow on the faces of the city's elite. Waiters moved like ghosts between the tables, pouring wine without ever disturbing the conversation. It was the kind of place where mergers were born and careers were ended over appetizers. I sat near the center of the room, acutely aware of every eye that might be watching. Today was supposed to be about securing the investment for the merger. It was supposed to be about business. But all I could think about was the woman sitting 3 tables away pretending not to know me. Valentina Vance was holding court with a group of investors. She looked impeccable in a navy blazer, her laughter polite and measured. She hadn't acknowledged me since I arrived. We had agreed to keep our distance in public. The blackmail arrangement was our secret, a shadow bond that tied us together while the world saw us as rivals. But sitting there, watching her gesture elegantly with her wine glass, I felt the pull of that secret like a physical tether. Every time she looked up, my breath hitched, wondering if her eyes would meet mine. They didn't. Not at first. Mark, the lead investor for my side of the deal, was holding court at my table. He was older, charming in a practiced way, and leaned too close when he spoke. I had spent the last 20 minutes deflecting his compliments about my dress, my hair, my success. He kept touching my arm when he laughed, a light, lingering graze that made my skin crawl. I smiled politely, keeping my posture rigid, remembering Valentina's instructions from the night before. Shoulders back. Chin up. Don't look weak. You're quiet tonight, Elena, Mark said, signaling the waiter for another round. Is the pressure getting to you? We can talk about the terms later. Maybe over dinner? Just the two of us. I tightened my grip on my water glass. I'm focused on the merger, Mark. Dinner isn't necessary. Everything is necessary in business, he countered, his smile widening. He reached out again, his hand landing on my wrist. You work too hard. You need someone to take care of you. I pulled my hand back slightly, forcing a laugh that felt brittle. I take care of myself. Do you? The voice cut through the air like a blade. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Valentina stood beside our table, having approached silently. She wasn't looking at Mark. She was looking at me. Her expression was neutral, professional, but her eyes were dark with a warning I felt in my bones. Valentina, Mark said, sounding surprised. I didn't realize you were joining us. I'm observing, Valentina said smoothly. It's important to see how the partners interact before signing. She finally shifted her gaze to Mark. Her smile was thin, devoid of warmth. And I see that Elena is being distracted. Mark laughed nervously, pulling his hand away from my wrist as if it had burned him. Just keeping morale up. Morale is important, Valentina agreed. But so is focus. He turned to me. Elena, a word? Before we proceed to the next phase of the meeting. It wasn't a question. I stood up, murmuring an apology to Mark, and followed Valentina. She didn't stop at a private room. She walked toward the restrooms, then veered sharply toward the service elevators at the back of the restaurant. I hurried to keep up with her long strides, my heart racing. When we reached the secluded alcove where the private elevator was located, she stopped. She didn't look at me. She pressed the call button. You let him touch you, she said. Her voice was low, calm, and terrifying. It was nothing, I said defensively. He's an investor. I didn't want to offend him. You let him touch your wrist, Elena. You let him lean into your space. She turned to face me, then, backing me against the wall beside the elevator doors. There was no one around. The noise of the restaurant was muffled here, distant. You belong to me for this month. Did you forget? I'm not yours, I whispered, though the words lacked heat. We're in public. Especially in public, she corrected. She stepped closer, invading my personal space until I could smell that familiar scent of white tea and ozone. Her hand moved to my lower back. It wasn't a gentle touch this time. It was possessive. Her palm pressed firmly against the spine, right above the curve of my waist. The heat of her hand seeped through the fabric of my dress. I gasped softly, my eyes widening. If he touches you again, I will ruin him, Valentina said. Her voice was a velvet threat. I don't care about his money. I don't care about the merger. You are mine to protect. And mine to discipline. The elevator dinged behind us. The doors slid open. She didn't move away. She kept her hand on my back, pressing me slightly into the wall, pinning me there with her presence. I should have pushed her away. I should have walked into the elevator and left her there. But my feet felt rooted to the floor. The possessiveness was suffocating, but it was also intoxicating. After years of fighting alone, of defending every inch of my company by myself, having someone step in front of me felt dangerous. And strangely safe. You're jealous, I said. The realization slipped out before I could stop it. Valentina's eyes narrowed. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. I'm possessive. Jealousy implies I care about him. I don't. I care about what's mine. The elevator doors began to close. She finally stepped back, but only to pull me into the car with her. She pressed the button for the lobby, then turned to face me. The small space amplified the tension. It was just us, the mirror walls, and the hum of the machinery. "Don't test me, Elena," she said softly. She reached out, fixing the collar of my blazer, which wasn't even crooked. Her fingers lingered on my neck, tracing the pulse point. "You're blushing again." "It's hot in here," I lied. "It's 70 degrees," she countered. She dropped her hand but didn't step back. "When we get back to the table, you will sit on my left. Not across from him. Next to me." "That's not protocol," I argued weakly. "Protocol changed 5 minutes ago," she said. The elevator slowed. She looked at me, her expression softening just a fraction. "Did you eat lunch?" The question threw me off. I blinked. "What? Lunch, Elena? Did you eat?" I shook my head. I was too nervous. I skipped it. Valentina sighed, a sound of genuine frustration. "You're going to faint during the presentation if you don't fuel yourself. You're stubborn to a fault." The doors opened to the lobby. She stepped out, expecting me to follow. I did, confused by the shift from threat to concern. We walked back to the table in silence. She guided me to the seat on her left, just as she ordered. Mark looked up, surprised, but said nothing under Valentina's cold gaze. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food, too aware of Valentina's knee brushing against mine under the table, a constant reminder of her presence. When the meeting finally ended, I returned to my office feeling drained. The confrontation in the elevator replayed in my mind over and over. The way she had claimed me. The way she had protected me. It was wrong. It was coercive. So why did I feel safer than I had in years? I sat at my desk, rubbing my eyes. It was past 3 in the afternoon. My stomach growled, reminding me of my skipped meal. I ignored it, reaching for the next file on my stack. There was a knock at my door. My assistant poked her head in. "There's a delivery for you, Elena. From Vance Corporation." My heart skipped. "Bring it in." She placed a large brown paper bag on my desk. It smelled incredible. Spicy Thai food. My favorite. The specific order I always got from the place 3 blocks away, the one with the extra chili oil that no one else knew I liked. Inside the bag was a container of pad thai, spring rolls, and a small note written on heavy cardstock. I opened the note. The handwriting was sharp, angular, unmistakably Valentina's. "Then work. Don't make me come up there and feed you myself." I stared at the note. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, surprised and breathless. It wasn't funny. It was threatening. But it was also caring. She had noticed. In the middle of a high-stakes lunch, in the middle of our game of power and control, she had noticed I was hungry. She had remembered what I liked. I opened the container. The steam rose up, warming my face. I took a bite, the spice hitting my tongue. It was perfect. I looked at the note again. "Don't make me come up there." I knew she meant it. If I hadn't eaten, she would have come. She would have marched into my office in front of my employees and made sure I was taken care of, regardless of the scandal it might cause. I set the fork down, my hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just blackmail anymore. Blackmail was cold. Blackmail was transactional. This was personal. Valentina was weaving herself into the fabric of my daily life, into my habits, into my needs. She wasn't just owning my time, she was owning my well-being. I should have been angry. I should have thrown the food away to make a point. But I was hungry. And I was tired of fighting alone. I picked up the fork again and took another bite. As I ate, I looked out the window toward the Vance Corp tower across the street. I wondered if she was watching. I wondered if she was thinking about me, about the way I had looked in the elevator, about the way I had let her hold me against the wall. The line between hate and love was thin, I realized. But the line between obsession and care was even thinner. Valentina was crossing them both, one meal at a time. I finished the food, wiped my mouth, and folded the note. I didn't throw it away. I put it in my top drawer next to the contract that started this mess. 7 p.m. was coming soon. I had told myself I dreaded it. But as I looked at the empty container, I realized I was checking my watch. I was waiting for the clock to tick down. I was waiting for her. The rivalry was still there. The anger was still there. But underneath it all, something new was growing. Something dangerous. Something that felt like hope. I straightened my shoulders, remembering her voice. Shoulders back. Chin up. I wasn't just surviving her anymore. I was partnering with her. And God help me, I wanted to see what happened next. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering under the streetlights. I stood outside the double doors of Valentina's office on the 48th floor of Vance Corporation. It was 7 p.m. exactly. I had kept my promise. I had come every night this week, enduring her cold commands, her scrutinizing gaze, the strange mix of humiliation and thrill that defined our arrangement. But tonight felt different. The building was quieter than usual. The security guard downstairs had given me a nod that felt almost sympathetic, as if he knew something I didn't. I pushed the door open. I expected to find her behind the desk, ready to issue an order. I expected the lights to be bright, the atmosphere crisp and demanding. Instead, the office was dark. The only illumination came from the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, pale shadows across the carpet. The air was still. No music. No typing. No voice. "Valentina?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the emptiness. There was no answer. I walked further into the room, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. I saw her then on the leather sofa in the corner of the office. She was curled slightly on her side, one arm thrown over her eyes. She was still wearing her suit from the day, but the jacket was discarded on the floor. Her shoes were kicked off near the table. Hooked. Broken. I stopped, unsure of what to do. The rules said I was to obey. The rules said she was in control. But this wasn't control. This was collapse. I walked closer, my steps silent. Valentina didn't move. I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of the sofa cushion. She was in pain. I recognized that posture. I had seen my father hold himself like that during the final months of his illness, when the migraines became too frequent to hide. "Valentina," I said again, softer this time. I reached out, hovering my hand over her shoulder. I didn't touch her. I waited. She flinched at my proximity, then slowly lowered her arm from her eyes. She looked up at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, the usual sharp intelligence clouded by exhaustion. She looked vulnerable in a way I had never seen. The shark was gone. In her place was just a woman who was tired. "You're late," she whispered. Her voice was raspy. "I'm exactly on time," I replied. I checked my watch. 7 p.m. "Time is relative when you're in pain," she muttered. She closed her eyes again, wincing as a spasm of tension rolled through her shoulders. "You should go." This wasn't the deal. The deal was compliance. "Not this." "Not what?" I asked. I didn't leave. Instead, I moved around the sofa. I saw a glass of water on the table, untouched and warm. I picked it up and went to the small kitchenette in the corner of her office. I ran the tap until the water was cold, then filled the glass again. I brought it back to her. "Drink," I said. It wasn't a request. She opened one eye, looking at me with a flicker of her old defiance. "Don't tell me what to do, Elena. Drink the water, Valentina. Please." The please hung in the air. It was the first time I had asked her for anything without coercion. She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly sat up. She took the glass. Her hand was shaking. Just slightly. A tremor that she would never allow anyone else to see. She drank deeply, then set the glass down with a heavy sigh. "Thank you," she said. The words sounded foreign to her. I didn't sit on the chair opposite her. I sat on the edge of the sofa, near her feet. The distance between us felt vast, even though we were inches apart. The power dynamic had shifted. I knew it. She knew it. The blackmail, the photos, the threats, they felt meaningless in the face of this human frailty. "Do you have medication?" I asked. "In my drawer," she murmured, pointing vaguely toward the desk. "The top left." I stood up and went to the desk. I found the bottle of painkillers. I brought them back with the water. She took 2 without argument. She leaned her head back against the cushion, exhaling slowly. "You should go home," she said again, though there was no force behind it. "I'm not in the mood for games tonight." "I'm not here for games," I said. I looked at her shoulders, knotted tight under the silk of her blouse. I knew what helped my father. Pressure. Heat. Silence. I hesitated, then asked, "Can I?" She looked at me, confused. "Can you what?" I gestured to her shoulders. "Let me help." Valentina stiffened. Her instinct was to reject touch, to reject weakness. But the pain was winning. She gave a barely perceptible nod. I moved behind the sofa. I placed my hands on her shoulders. Her muscles were like stone, hard and unyielding. I began to press my thumbs into the tension, working in slow, circular motions. She inhaled sharply at the first touch. A sound that was half pain, half relief. I kept going, steady and firm. I didn't speak. I just worked the knots, feeling the gradual surrender of her body under my hands. The silence of the office wrapped around us, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, intimate. "You have strong hands," she said after a few minutes. Her voice was softer now, slurred slightly by the medication beginning to take hold. "I had to be," I replied. "My father got sick often toward the end. I learned how to take care of him." Valentina was quiet for a long time. I thought she had fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "No one takes care of me, Elena." The confession hit me harder than any of her threats had. I stopped massaging for a moment, my hands resting on her shoulders. I leaned down, closer to her ear. "I know," I said. "Everyone wants something," she continued. "They want the contract. They want the merger. They want the stock price. They look at me and see a signature. They don't see this." She gestured vaguely at herself. "I see you," I said. And I meant it. I saw the lines of exhaustion around her eyes. I saw the way her hair had fallen out of its clip. I saw the woman beneath the CEO. She turned her head slightly, looking back at me. Her eyes were wet. She wasn't crying, but she was close. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "The blackmail is over if you walk out that door. I won't send the photos. I can't. I can't be what you need me to be tonight." "You don't have to be anything," I said. I moved around the sofa and sat beside her. I didn't touch her this time. I just sat in the quiet. "I'm here because I want to be." She looked at me, searching for the lie. When she didn't find one, her shoulders dropped another inch. She leaned her head against my shoulder. It was a tentative movement, like a bird landing on a branch. I stayed still, letting her rest there. "This isn't part of the deal," she whispered. "The deal changed," I said. We sat like that for a long time. The city lights shifted outside as clouds passed over the moon. I could feel her breathing slow down, becoming deeper, more rhythmic. The tension left her body completely. She was asleep. I should have left. I should have taken the opportunity to escape, to reclaim my freedom while she was unconscious. But I didn't move. I adjusted my position slightly to make her more comfortable, letting her weight rest against me. I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. This was not the peace of victory. It was the peace of connection. I watched her sleep. In the dim light, she looked younger. The armor was gone. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, my fingers lingering on her cheek. Her skin was cool. I wondered how long it had been since someone had touched her without wanting something in return. An hour passed. Then the office remained dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't check my phone. I just existed in that space with her. Eventually, Valentina stirred. She lifted her head from my shoulder, blinking against the dim light. She looked disoriented for a moment, then memory returned. She looked at me, really looked at me. "You're still here," she said. The words were filled with wonder. "I'm still here," I confirmed. "Why?" I shrugged, smiling slightly. "The medication kicked in. You looked peaceful. I didn't want to wake you." She sat up fully, rubbing her face. The vulnerability was receding, the mask sliding back into place, but it was slower this time. Cracks remained. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "I know." She looked at her hands, then at me. There was a shift in her eyes. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something warmer, something uncertain. "The photos," she said quietly. "What about them?" "They're in my safe," she said. "But I haven't looked at them in a week." My heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that leverage requires interest, Elena. And I'm losing interest in holding this over you." She looked up, meeting my gaze. "You took care of me. No one has ever. Just stayed." I didn't know what to say. The blackmail had been the foundation of our relationship for weeks. Without it, what were we? "Does this mean the deal is off?" I asked. Valentina stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the city. Her silhouette was strong again, but the stiffness was gone. "The deal was for 1 month," she said. "We are halfway there. But the terms are negotiable." He turned back to me. "You can go home, Elena. Really go home. No expectations tonight." I stood up too. I gathered my bag. I walked to the door, then stopped. I looked back at her. He was watching me, waiting. "I'll see you tomorrow," I said. Valentina smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached her eyes. 7 p.m.? 7 p.m. I agreed. I walked out of the office and into the hallway. The building was silent. I took the elevator down to the lobby, stepping out into the cool night air. I should have felt triumphant. I had seen her weak. I had gained the upper hand. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt protective. I walked to my car, my mind replaying the feeling of her head on my shoulder. The weight of her trust. I realized then that the blackmail didn't matter anymore. She could have sent the photos tomorrow and it wouldn't have changed what happened on that sofa. I would have stayed anyway. I started the engine, but I didn't drive away immediately. I sat in the dark car looking up at the 48th floor. The lights were still off. He was up there alone again. But for the first time I knew she wasn't as alone as she thought. I put the car in gear and drove home. The city lights blurred past, but I wasn't looking at them. I was thinking about tomorrow. I was thinking about how I wouldn't be going there because I had to. I was going because I wanted to see if she was okay. I was going because the line between captor and companion had blurred beyond recognition. I parked in my garage and walked up to my apartment. It felt empty compared to the silence in her office. I poured a glass of water and sat on my own couch, touching my shoulder where her head had rested. The warmth was still there, phantom and real. I had gone there to survive a blackmail scheme. I was staying to save something else. Something fragile. Something that felt like the beginning of love, disguised as a business arrangement. I closed my eyes and for the first time in weeks I didn't dream of contracts or scandals. I dreamed of silence and rain, and a woman who finally let someone else hold the weight. The grand ballroom of the hotel was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, a spectacle of wealth that usually made me feel like an imposter. Tonight, however, the feeling was different. It wasn't imposter syndrome, it was anticipation. I stood near the edge of the room, a flute of champagne untouched in my hand, watching the crowd swirl. I was wearing a dress I had bought specifically for this night. Deep emerald green, silk that draped like water over my skin, with a back that dipped low enough to feel daring but high enough to remain professional. I had spent an hour on my hair, curling it into loose waves that cascaded down my shoulders. I told myself I was doing it for the merger. I told myself I was doing it to Project Strength. But when I caught my reflection in the mirror before leaving, I knew I was doing it for her. Valentina was somewhere in the crowd. I hadn't seen her yet, but I could feel her presence like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Since the night in her office, since I had stayed when I could have left, something had changed between us. The texts were no longer commands, they were questions. Are you eating? Did you sleep? The meetings were no longer interrogations, they were collaborations. But the blackmail still hung over us, a sword of Damocles waiting to drop. We hadn't spoken about it since that night on the sofa. It was the elephant in the room, the secret foundation of everything we had built over the last few weeks. Tonight was the annual industry gala, the place where reputations were made and broken. It was the perfect stage for a tragedy or a redemption. I took a sip of the champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. I was scanning the room for her when a shadow fell over me. I turned to find Sterling, a competitor who had been trying to buy out my firm for years. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He held a tablet in his hand, angled slightly away from me. "Lena, you look radiant," he said. "Though I hear things are less than radiant behind the scenes." My stomach tightened. I kept my expression neutral. "Sterling, I didn't expect to see you here. Oh, I wouldn't miss this." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It's about the photos, Elena. The ones from the gala last month. I hear Vance Corp has them. I hear they're quite compromising." I froze. The glass in my hand felt slippery. How did he know? Valentina had promised they were secure. Had she leaked them? No, that didn't make sense. She had protected me at lunch. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "Don't play coy," he smirked. "I have sources. Imagine what the board would think. Elena Rossetti, involved in a scandalous affair with her biggest rival. It speaks to poor judgment. To vulnerability. I'm willing to offer you a buyout price that reflects the risk. A low one." He was threatening me. Using Valentina's leverage against me. He thought he could squeeze me out by threatening to expose what Valentina was holding over me. I felt trapped. If he went public, the merger would fail. My company would be swallowed. I looked around for Valentina, but the crowd was thick. I was alone. "You have nothing," I said. "I have enough," Sterling replied. He tapped the screen of his tablet. "One email, Elena. One email to the board and you're done. Unless you sign the preliminary agreement tonight. He held out a pen. It was a trap. Sign away my company now or lose it later. I stared at the pen, my hand trembling. I couldn't sign. I couldn't lose everything my father had built. But I couldn't fight this alone. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice cut through the tension like a knife. Sterling flinched. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The air behind me grew warmer, charged with that familiar energy. Valentina stepped up beside me. She was wearing a tuxedo suit, tailored to perfection, sharp and authoritative. She didn't look at Sterling. She looked at me. Her eyes checked me over, ensuring I was okay before shifting to him. Valentina, Sterling said, recovering his smile. Just having a friendly chat with Elena. It didn't look friendly, Valentina said. Her voice was cold, devoid of any social grace. It looked like coercion. Business is coercion, Sterling countered. He lifted the tablet slightly. I was just discussing some information I came across. Regarding Elena's private life. Valentina's gaze dropped to the tablet. She didn't blink. She reached out and took the tablet from his hand. He tried to resist, but her grip was iron. She looked at the screen, then back at him. You have copies, she stated. I have connections, Sterling said proudly. Valentina smiled. It was a terrifying smile. You think you have leverage? She tapped the screen once, twice. Then she handed the tablet back to him. The screen was black. What did you do? Sterling demanded. I hacked your cloud server, Valentina said casually. As I said, you have connections. I have resources. Those photos are gone, Sterling. From your device, from your backups, from wherever else you thought you hid them. Sterling paled. You can't do that. I just did, Valentina said. She stepped closer, her height imposing. And if I find out you have spoken to anyone else about Elena Rossetti, I will not just hack your server. I will dismantle your company piece by piece until there is nothing left but the logo. Do you understand me? Sterling looked between us. He realized he was outmatched. He shoved the tablet into his pocket and backed away. This isn't over, he muttered, but the threat was hollow. He turned and disappeared into the crowd. I was left standing there, my heart pounding. Valentina turned to me. The coldness in her eyes melted away, replaced by concern. Are you okay? She asked. You deleted them, I said. The realization was slowly dawning on me. You deleted his copies. But you still have the originals. Valentina shook her head. Elena. I deleted them all. My breath caught. All of them? Every copy. Every backup. The leverage is gone. She took a step closer, ignoring the people watching us. The whispers were already starting. People saw Sterling retreat. They saw Valentina defend me. The story would be all over the industry by morning. Vance Corp defending Rossetti Designs. Looked like a partnership. Looked like love. But I whispered. You gave up your power. You could have kept them. You could have kept me. I never wanted to keep you prisoner, she said softly. I wanted you to see me. And I wanted to see you. Not the CEO. Not the rival. Just you. She offered me her hand. Dance with me. The orchestra was starting a slow waltz. The crowd was moving to the floor. I looked at her hand. It was open, waiting. No commands. No threats. Just an invitation. If I dance with you, everyone will know, I said. Let them know, Valentina replied. I placed my hand in hers. Her fingers closed around mine, warm and secure. She led me to the dance floor. The music swelled, strings and piano filling the space. She placed one hand on my waist, the other holding my hand. I placed my free hand on her shoulder. The contact was electric. We began to move. We had danced before in a way during our negotiations. But this was different. There was no strategy. No maneuvering. Just the rhythm of the music and the warmth of her body against mine. She led me effortlessly, guiding me through the steps. I followed, trusting her completely. You risked a lot tonight, I said as we turned. I risked nothing, she corrected. I gained everything. The blackmail is over, I said. The deal is done. You don't have to see me anymore. Valentina stopped moving. We were in the center of the floor, surrounded by blurred lights and faces. She didn't let go of my hand. She looked at me, her expression serious. The deal was for 1 month, she said. It ends tonight. You're free, Elena. You can walk away. You can go back to being my rival. You can pretend this never happened. She paused, searching my eyes. Or, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. You can stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to. This was the moment. The cliff edge. If I walked away, I was safe. I was independent. I was free of Valentina Vance. But if I stayed, I was stepping into the unknown. I was choosing the shark. I was choosing the woman who had blackmailed me, who had protected me, who had held me when she was in pain. I thought about the last few weeks. The food delivery. The massage in the dark office. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. I thought about how empty my apartment felt when I wasn't waiting for 7 p.m. I thought about how safe I felt when she was near. I didn't want to walk away. I tightened my grip on her hand. I stepped closer, eliminating the space between us. I looked up into her eyes. I don't want to walk away, I said. Valentina let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for weeks. Her shoulders relaxed. A smile broke across her face, genuine and radiant. She pulled me closer, her hand on my waist pressing me against her. Good, she whispered. Because I wasn't ready to let you go. We continued dancing. The music faded into the background. The whispers of the crowd faded. There was only us. I rested my head against her shoulder, feeling the steady beat of her heart. It matched mine. I realized then that the blackmail had been the catalyst, but it wasn't the foundation. The foundation was built in the quiet moments. The water when she was sick. The food when I was hungry. The protection when I was threatened. We had started as enemies, bound by coercion. But we were ending the night as partners, bound by choice. The song ended. The applause broke out, but we didn't separate immediately. Valentina held me for a moment longer, then kissed the top of my head. Let's go home, she said. Home. Not her penthouse. Not my apartment. Home. Together. We walked off the dance floor hand in hand. People stared. Cameras flashed. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting my reputation. I was protecting my heart. And I knew with absolute certainty that it was in the safest hands possible. As we exited the ballroom, the cool night air hit us. Valentina stopped and turned to me. She reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, just like she had in her office. But this time there was no tension. No fear. I love you, she said. Simple. Direct. My heart stopped. Then it started again, faster than before. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. I love you too, I replied. He kissed me then. It wasn't a shy kiss. It was a claim. A promise. A beginning. When she pulled away, she took my hand again. 7 p.m. tomorrow? She asked, teasing. I laughed. How about breakfast instead? Breakfast, she agreed. We walked to the car together. The city lights glittered above us, no longer cold or distant. They were just lights. The warmth was here, in her hand, in her voice, in her heart. The blackmail was over. The romance had just begun. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was ready to see what the light looked like. My apartment was nothing like Valentina's penthouse. Where her space was all sharp angles, cold concrete, and minimalist silence, mine was warm. Soft lamps cast golden pools of light across the wooden floors. Throw blankets were draped over the sofa. Books were stacked on the coffee table. It was a lived-in space, a space that breathed. But tonight it felt too quiet. I had cleaned everything twice. I had changed the sheets. I had lit a candle that smelled of vanilla and sandalwood, trying to chase away the lingering scent of the office, of the gala, of the stress that usually clung to my clothes. Tonight was different. For the first time in a month, there were no rules. There was no blackmail hanging over my head like a storm cloud. There was no contract demanding my presence. Valentina was coming over because I had invited her. Because we had confessed love in the lobby of a hotel, surrounded by flashing cameras and whispers. But here in the privacy of my home, the confessions felt heavier. I checked the clock for the 10th time. 7 p.m. She was late. Not by much, only 5 minutes, but my heart hammered anyway. Had she changed her mind? Had the public declaration at the gala been too much? Was the reality of us too complicated now that the leverage was gone? The doorbell rang. I jumped, smoothing my hands down my sweater. I walked to the door and opened it. Valentina stood there. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing dark jeans and a simple black cashmere sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in. Her hair was loose, falling around her face in waves. She looked beautiful, but she also looked nervous. She held a bottle of wine in one hand, gripping the neck tightly. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she replied. She didn't move to come in immediately. She stood on the threshold, looking past me into the warmth of my living room. "It smells nice in here." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "It's cold out." She stepped inside, kicking off her shoes by the mat. He handed me the wine. I took it, our fingers brushing. The spark was still there, that electric pull that had started with fear and had morphed into something undeniable. I closed the door and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking felt significant. We were alone. No boards, no investors, no rivals. Just us. I opened the wine and poured us each a glass. We stood in the kitchen for a moment, awkwardly sipping. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. We were navigating new territory. The dynamic of the last month had been clear. He commanded, I obeyed. It was a structure, even if it was built on coercion. Now the structure was gone. We had to build something new. I walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. Valentina followed, but she didn't sit next to me. She stood by the armchair watching me. "You're quiet," I said. "I'm thinking," she replied. She set her glass down on the table. "About how to do this right." "Do what right?" "This." She gestured between us. "For a month I told you what to do. I told you where to be, how to stand, when to speak. I took away your choices." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to do that anymore. But I don't know how to be with you without taking charge." I patted the space on the sofa next to me. "Sit, Valentina. Please." She sat. She kept a small distance between us, respectful, waiting. "You don't have to stop being who you are," I said. "I liked some of it." He looked at me, surprised. "You like being controlled?" "I liked not having to be in charge," I admitted. The words were hard to say. All day, every day I make decisions. I decide salaries, I decide mergers, I decide the future of hundreds of employees. My father left me this company and I feel like I have to carry the weight of it every second. When I was with you, when you told me what to do, I didn't have to think. I just had to be. It was a relief." Valentina's expression softened. She reached out, her hand hovering near my knee. "Can I?" she asked. The question surprised me. In the past she would have just touched me. She would have assumed consent because of the deal. Now she was asking. "Yes," I whispered. She placed her hand on my knee. Her palm was warm. She didn't move it further up. She just let it rest there, grounding me. "I didn't want to control you because I enjoyed your submission, Elena," she said quietly. "I wanted to control you because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if I didn't hold you tight, you'd slip away. Afraid that you'd never look at me the way I looked at you. The blackmail. It was a coward's way of getting your attention. I knew you'd never give it to me freely. We were rivals. We were supposed to hate each other." "We did hate each other," I said with a small smile. "I hated how much I wanted you," she corrected. She moved her hand from my knee to my hand, interlacing our fingers. "Can I kiss you?" My breath hitched. The asking was intoxicating. It made me feel valued, not used. "Yes." She leaned in. The kiss was slow, tentative at first, then deepening as the hesitation faded. It tasted of wine and warmth. She didn't push me back against the cushions. She didn't demand access. She kissed me like she was memorizing the shape of my lips. I leaned into her, my free hand coming up to rest on her cheek. Her skin was soft. She sighed into the kiss, a sound of relief that vibrated through my chest. When we pulled apart, we were close enough that our foreheads touched. "Bedroom?" I whispered. Valentina pulled back slightly to look at me. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She stood up and offered me her hand. I took it. She led me down the hallway to my bedroom. The lights were low, just the bedside lamp glowing. She stopped at the foot of the bed. She turned to face me. "Can I?" she asked again, her hand resting on the hem of my sweater. "Yes." She lifted the sweater slowly, giving me time to change my mind at any second. I raised my arms and she pulled it over my head. The air was cool on my skin, but her gaze was hot. She tossed the sweater aside. Her hands came to rest on my waist, her thumbs tracing the line of my hips. "You're beautiful," she said. It wasn't a line. It sounded like a prayer. She unbuttoned her own sweater, letting it fall. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. There was no rush. No demand to perform. No need to prove anything. I stepped forward and pressed my body against hers. Skin to skin. The contact sent a shockwave through me. I could feel her heart beating against my chest, fast and hard. She walked me backward until my legs hit the mattress. She guided me down, following me. She didn't climb on top of me immediately. She lay beside me, propping herself up on one elbow so she could look at my face. Her hand traced the line of my jaw down my neck over my collarbone. Every touch was deliberate. Every touch was a question answered by my breath, by the arch of my back, by the way I leaned into her. "Is this okay?" She murmured against my skin. "It's more than okay," I breathed. The intimacy that followed wasn't about conquest. It was about connection. It was slow and tender, punctuated by whispers and soft laughs. When I tangled my fingers in her hair, she didn't pull away. When she kissed the sensitive spot behind my ear, I didn't flinch. We moved together like we had been doing this for years, not weeks. The tension of the rivalry, the fear of the blackmail, the stress of the business, it all dissolved into the sheets. There was only the heat of her body, the weight of her arm over my waist, the sound of our breathing syncing up. Afterward, the room was quiet again. But it wasn't the heavy silence of the office. It was the peaceful silence of safety. I was lying on my side and Valentina was behind me, her arm draped over me, pulling me close against her chest. Her leg was hooked over mine, anchoring me. I reached for the blanket at the foot of the bed and pulled it up over us. Valentina tucked it around my shoulders, her movements automatic and caring. "Are you cold?" she asked softly. "A little." She tightened her hold. "I've got you." I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into the mattress. I felt heavy in a good way. Grounded. "Valentina," I said. Thank you." "For what?" "For asking. For tonight. For seeing me." He kissed the back of my neck. "I didn't want your body, Elena. I wanted you to see me. That was all I ever wanted. To be seen by someone who wasn't afraid of me." I turned in her arms so I could face her. The dim light caught the gold flecks in her eyes. "I see you," I said. "I see the woman who brings me food when I forget to eat. The woman who stays up late to protect me. The woman who is scared of being alone." Valentina's eyes glistened. She pulled me closer, burying her face in my hair. "I'm not alone anymore," she whispered. We lay there for a long time, talking in hushed tones. We talked about the merger. We talked about the scandal that would inevitably hit the news tomorrow. We talked about how we would handle it together. But mostly we talked about nothing. We talked about what kind of coffee she liked in the morning. We talked about the book on my nightstand. We talked about the rain against the window. Eventually her breathing slowed. Her grip on me loosened slightly as she drifted toward sleep. I watched her face. The lines of stress were gone. She looked peaceful. I realized then that I had surrendered something too. I had surrendered my independence, my need to do everything alone. I had let someone else carry the weight. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt lighter. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of her heart. It was a lullaby better than any silence. I knew tomorrow would bring challenges. The board would have questions. The press would have headlines. Sterling might try something else. But none of it mattered right now. Right now I was safe. Right now I was loved. I shifted slightly, getting more comfortable in her embrace. Valentina stirred, instinctively pulling me closer even in her sleep. "Good night, Valentina," I whispered. She murmured something unintelligible, a soft sound of contentment. I smiled in the dark. The blackmail was over. The game was done. But us, we were just getting started. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was ready for it. As long as I had this. As long as I had her. I let the darkness take me, safe in the knowledge that when I woke up I wouldn't be alone. I would be wrapped in cashmere and warmth, held by the woman who had broken me down just to build me back up again. The surrender wasn't a loss. It was a gift. And I accepted it willingly. 3 months later, the view from the 48th floor looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. The rain had stopped weeks ago, replaced by a crisp autumn sun that poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the city in gold. The office was no longer divided. There was no Vance Corp side and no Rossetti Design side. There was just Vance Rossetti Enterprises, a merged entity that dominated the skyline both literally and figuratively. The walls between our offices had been knocked down, replaced by glass that allowed light to flow freely between us. It was a physical manifestation of what had happened between Valentina and me. No more secrets. No more shadows. No more closed doors. I sat at my desk reviewing the final contracts for the new partnership. The paperwork was thick, binding, and permanent. But unlike the merger documents from months ago, these didn't feel like a trap. They felt like a foundation. I signed the last page with a flourish, the ink drying quickly in the warm air. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms above my head. My body felt loose, relaxed. The constant tension that had lived in my shoulders for years. The weight of protecting my father's legacy, the fear of failure, the anxiety of rivalry, had evaporated. I looked across the room. Valentina was at her desk, typing on her laptop. She was wearing a white blouse today, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked less like a shark and more like a partner. She sensed my gaze and looked up, catching my eye. She didn't glare. She didn't scrutinize. She smiled. It was a small, private smile that was just for me. "Done?" she asked, her voice carrying easily across the open space. "Just finished," I replied. I stood up and walked over to her desk. I leaned against the edge, crossing my arms. "You know, the board is expecting us at the lunch meeting in 20 minutes. Valentina closed her laptop. "I know." She stood up and walked around the desk to stand in front of me. She was close but not too close. Respectful of the workspace even if we owned it. "Are you ready?" "Boys," I said. "But I'm thirsty." She raised an eyebrow. "There's water in the kitchen." "I want coffee," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "The good stuff. From that place on the corner. The one with the extra shot." Valentina laughed. It was a genuine sound, rich and warm. "You're ordering me around, Elena." "In our office." "It's our office," I corrected. "And I'm the CEO. Technically I can order whatever I want." Valentina stepped closer, her hands resting on my hips. "Technically we are co-CEOs. But practically." She leaned in, whispering near my ear. "I think I like it when you take charge." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks, just like I had months ago in her penthouse. But this time it wasn't from fear or coercion. It was from desire. From the knowledge that she wanted to please me not because she had to but because she loved me. "Go get me the coffee, Valentina," I said softly. "Yes, ma'am," she teased. She kissed my cheek, a quick, bright contact, then grabbed her jacket. "I'll be back in 10. Don't start the meeting without me." I watched her walk away. She didn't stride with the predatory grace she used to have. She walked with a lightness, a bounce in her step that hadn't been there before. She was happy. We were happy. Still felt surreal sometimes. I had started this journey trapped by blackmail, forced into submission by a rival who wanted to destroy me. Now I was sending that same rival to get me coffee and she was going willingly. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had balanced. We lifted each other up. While I waited, I walked to the window. The city sprawled out below, busy and indifferent. People were rushing to meetings, fighting for contracts, worrying about scandals. I remembered standing here 3 months ago, watching the rain blur the lights, feeling like my world was ending. I remembered the envelope on my desk. The photos. The threat. Valentina returned exactly 10 minutes later, holding 2 cups. She handed me mine, then leaned against the window beside me. We stood in silence for a moment, sipping the coffee. It was perfect. Hot, strong, exactly how I liked it. "You remembered the extra shot," I said. "I remember everything about you," she replied. She set her cup down on the sill. "There's something else I need to show you. Before we go to the lunch." My heart skipped a beat. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," she said. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, thick envelope. My breath caught. It looked just like the one from that first night. The manila paper was crisp, sealed with wax. "Valentina," I started, my voice tight. "I know what you thought," she said. She turned to face me fully. "The photos, Elena. The originals. I kept them." "Why?" I asked. The hurt slipped out before I could stop it. "After everything? After the gala? After last night?" "Because I wanted to give them back to you," she said. "Not to use. To destroy. Together." She walked over to the small fireplace in the corner of the office. It was decorative, rarely used, but today she had laid a small stack of paper in the grate. She struck a match and lit the corner of the paper. A small flame flickered to life. She turned back to me, holding out the envelope. "Do you want to do it?" I walked over to her. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, heavier than it should have been. This was the weight of the last year. The fear. The coercion. The nights I spent worrying about my reputation. I opened the seal. I pulled out the photos. I looked at them one last time. They looked harmless now. Just images of a woman laughing, a hand on a waist. They had no power. Not anymore. I dropped them into the fire. The edges curled instantly, turning black. The flames licked up, consuming the images. The scandal. The leverage. The blackmail. It all turned to ash in seconds. I watched until there was nothing left but gray flakes rising up the chimney. Valentina stood beside me, watching the fire with me. Her shoulder pressed against mine. Stunned, she said, "No copies. No backups. Nothing." I turned to her. "There are no strings left, Valentina. You know that. If you walk away now, I have nothing on you. And you have nothing on me." "I don't want to walk away," she said. She took my hand, interlacing our fingers. "I never did. Not really. The blackmail was a mistake. A desperate way to keep you close when I thought you hated me. I was wrong. You didn't hate me. You were just waiting for me to be honest." I squeezed her hand. "I was waiting for you to see me." "I see you," she said. "And I'm not letting go." The fire crackled softly, the last of the paper turning to dust. I felt a lightness in my chest, as if a physical weight had been lifted. I was free. Not just from the blackmail, but from the past. From the rivalry. From the need to prove myself against her. We were on the same side now. The intercom on the desk buzzed. My assistant's voice came through. "The board is assembled, Elena. They're waiting for you both." Valentina looked at me. "Ready to face them?" "Together," I said. We walked out of the office side by side. We didn't hide our hands. We didn't separate when we reached the elevator. We walked into the boardroom as partners. The investors looked up, some whispering, some smiling. They knew the story. They knew about the gala. They knew about the merger. But they didn't know the real story. They didn't know about the rain or the penthouse or the fire in the office. They didn't know that the woman sitting at the head of the table, the one who used to be my enemy, was the one who held my heart. We sat down. Valentina pulled my chair out for me before taking her own. A small gesture, but one that didn't go unnoticed. The meeting began. We spoke in turns, finishing each other's sentences, supporting each other's points. There was no competition. No trying to outdo the other. Just a unified front. When the meeting ended, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The merger was solid. The future was secure. As the board members filed out, shaking our hands, Valentina stayed seated. I packed my bag slowly, enjoying the quiet moment. When the last person left, Valentina stood up and walked over to me. She didn't say anything. She just opened her arms. I stepped into them, resting my head against her chest. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. I could hear her heartbeat. Steady. Strong. We stood there for a long time, looking out the window at the city. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the floor. The lights of the buildings were starting to flicker on one by one. "Do you remember that first night?" Valentina asked softly. I smiled. "The rain? The desk? The threat?" "The threat," she agreed. He kissed the top of my head. "I was so sure I would lose you. I thought if I let you go, you'd never come back." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I know," she replied. She pulled back slightly to look at me. Her eyes were bright, reflecting the city lights. "You know, when I started this, I thought I was winning a business deal. I thought I was acquiring a competitor. No?" I asked. Valentina smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She brushed a stray hair from my face, her touch lingering on my cheek. "Now I know I was wrong," she said. "I wasn't acquiring a company. I was finding a partner." She leaned in, her forehead resting against mine. "Best deal I ever made." I laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I think I got the better end of that deal." We stood there as the city darkened around us, two silhouettes against the glass. The blackmail was ash. The rivalry was history. The future was unwritten, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what was on the page. I knew who was writing it with me. And I knew that no matter what storms came, no matter what rain fell against the glass, we would face it together. I took her hand. "Let's go home." "Home," she agreed. We walked out of the office, turning off the lights as we went. The darkness of the room didn't matter anymore. We carried our own light. And as the elevator descended, taking us down to the streets below, I knew that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The end of the enemies. The beginning of us. And I couldn't wait to see where we went next. And so, Valentina and Elena stepped away from the desk where it all began, into a partnership built not on leverage but on love. They burned the photos, but they kept the fire. They started as enemies, but they ended as equals. Sometimes, The greatest power isn't in controlling someone else, but in surrendering to the one who holds your heart. Thank you for listening to Blackmailed by My Rival. If this story sparked a flame, if you felt the tension of the boardroom and the warmth of the aftercare, please leave a like. It helps more listeners find this tale. Comment below. Do you think Valentina's blackmail was justified by the outcome? Would you have signed the deal? And subscribe for more dark, immersive romance audiobooks. Until next time, keep your rivals close and your lovers closer.